Hello, my name is Lance and happy to see you guys again. I'll be starting the first point of error right here soon. All right. So Lee Harvey Oswald was not guilty. Let's go into this. So I would like to go into the 3 points of error I have here, Your Honors. Good morning, Mr. Chief Justice and Associate Justices, and may it please the Court. I, Lance Belderl, along with my co-counsel, Madison Adelstein, will be representing Lee Harvey Oswald in this case before you today. So on Friday, November 22nd, 1963, about 12:30 p.m., shots were fired at the president, in which 3 people were hit and President Kennedy died. 2 days later, on Sunday, November 25th, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald was killed. So let's look at the 3 points of error we'll be introducing, in which one, all investigation was based on one alleged murderer, and the investigation was based on the presumption of guilt. 2, evidence was ignored, in which the witnesses had mysterious deaths, and some evidence was even changed. And finally, 3, the cover-up began immediately, making it a pre-planned part of the original plot. So if we stop right here, we would satisfy all 5 of these things, which we would satisfy the Warren Commission report. We would satisfy the media of that day. We would have satisfied the police investigations. And we would have satisfied the FBI investigation. And finally, we would have satisfied the Secret Service investigation. But we would not actually, Your Honors, because if we go further than that, we have to, sorry about that. It's kind of laggy today. All right. So no one knew what was going to happen on that day, right? That's the presumption that we have here, Your Honors. But did they really not know what was going to happen? Because we have this video right here of which the police chief Curry actually knew 2 days before the visit. I will be skipping all videos for now in order to make this thing as short as we can. And also going into the first point of error, in which all investigation was based on one alleged murderer, and the investigation was based on the presumption of guilt. So Lee Harvey Oswald, from almost 12:30 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, was not the only prime suspect. He was the only suspect in this case, because information was used by the press to manipulate the narrative to give the public the only logical conclusion that Oswald was guilty. So the only evidence that fit into this narrative was used. Real investigation actually investigates to obtain the criminal and not the criminal to get the crime, Your Honors. So immediately we begin shifting the burden here, because when a person or group of people try to switch either blame from one place and place it on another, this becomes proof that you have a theory before the event. In other words, you actually know what was going to happen. So the people who were in on the conspiracy that day knew what was going to happen based on this kind of logic, Your Honor. So the best evidence of this shifting is actually this Dallas Morning News reporter, in which the witness Mary Woodward, it said that the shots came from behind her. The grassy knoll Secret Service stopped, in which the bullets were from behind, Your Honors. So immediately pressure was put on this paper to change the story, because the DMN was a morning paper. Mary's account was not circulated until the next day, November 23rd, appearing on page 3 of section 1 on the right-hand side, below of a large photo of the alleged assassin's view of Elm Street from the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository. On the left side of the page were photos of the sniper's nest and the entire building, with an article entitled "Kennedy Killer Hid in the Area Used Little" in the bottom left corner, accompanied by a floor plan showing the assassin's hideout. So these 2 articles prove that 1, the Zapruder film was fake, 2, shots came from the back, 3, the media was still almost 30 years after the fact trying to get the public to buy their story, 4, the pressure on the witnesses, and finally 5, there was a conspiracy that started before the shooting, which went through the cover-up and continues today, Your Honor. So on August 17, 1980, Dallas Times Herald explanation of the article, despite her assertion that gunfire appeared to be coming from her right, 2 Dallas reporters decided in 1980 that the whole matter was simply a mistake on Miss Woodward's part. So the same article concluded that this conclusion is contained in an article published on August 17, 1980, defending the Warren report's conclusions. So with no evidence that they actually spoke to Miss Woodward or the others, Doug Bedell and Hugh Ainsworth of the now defunct Dallas Times Herald provided their own explanations, of which I quote, "The origins of the so-called grassy knoll theory of a second gunman can be traced to the simple mistake of a Dallas Morning News reporter out for lunch with her cohorts to watch the motorcade." So when Kennedy was shot, she raced back to the office to file a tearful, horrified account of what she had seen. "Gunfire," she wrote, came over her right shoulder. That way she was facing, that would mean that the shots would have come from the knoll. And when her friends saw the story, they rushed in to correct her. The story was corrected for later editions. In spite of affidavits to the contrary, attorney Mark Lane used the woman's uncorrected account of the shooting to bolster his assertion that another gunman was involved. So we will show that the Attorney General's office informed the Warren Commissions immediately on what to do. The FBI informed the President Johnson what to do. The press informed the people what to do. And this took coordination and pre-planning before it even took place. And the cover-up continues with misinformation today, Your Honors. And this from Katzenbach in AG office, if you read the memorandum, in which it actually says that the public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin, that he did not have Confederates who are still at large, and that the evidence was such that he would have been convicted at trial. So speculation about Oswald's motivation ought to be cut off, and we should have some basis for rebutting the thought that this was a communist conspiracy, or, as the Iron Curtain press saying, a right-wing conspiracy to blame it on the communists. Unfortunately, the facts on Oswald seem about too obvious. The Dallas police have put out statements on the communist conspiracy theory, and it was that they were who were in charge when he was shot and thus silenced. So this is an important aspect we should look at. In any investigation, you must establish a motive. So let's look at Oswald's motive for wanting to kill President Kennedy. Why did he want to kill Kennedy? Note that with this memo, the Assistant Attorney General of the United States is calling for the commission to cut off the questionings of the motive. But we must all ask, why do they want to cut off the motive of Oswald wanting to kill Kennedy? Why do they want to cut this motive off? So I think you can await publication of the FBI report and public reaction to it here and abroad. I think, however, that a statement that all the facts will be made public property in an orderly and responsible way should be made now. We need something to head off public speculation or congressional hearings of the wrong sort, Your Honor. So here are the questions posed we have now. If the investigation was a real one, would you need to come up with a conclusion first before you investigate? This memo clearly explains that the Warren Commission was never intended to investigate the JFK murder, just rubber stamp the JFK FBI report. Does this sound like what the government should be doing at all? So the cover-up begins with the motive. If you take out the questions about motive, you may be able to spoon-feed the public the information you want them to know, so you can get your predetermined conclusion and cover up the people who actually did the crime. So this based the investigation on presumption of guilt, Your Honor, in which the extensive plan proves that it was not a lone assassin. The extensive media campaign points out the fact that Oswald investigation began as not an investigation under the presumption of innocence, but a presumption of guilt. So in Oswald's case, the presumption of innocence was never there, because instead what it should have been was this, the investigation of assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and not just rubber stamping the whole thing. So FBI Hoover to President LBJ, November 29, 1963, in which this testimony has very peculiar conversation. So President Johnson asked, how many shots were fired? And then Hoover replied, 3. And then he further went to say, any of them fired at me? So Hoover said, no, all 3 at the president, and we have them. 2 shots were splintered, but our ballistic expert was able to prove that they were fired by this gun. So please note, on this testimony, only 2 bullet casings that had been found were sent to DC on Friday. Another bent casing was later sent that next Monday. The bent casing from a safety plug was not a casing with a bullet. And what you can see with this testimony is not the beginnings of the story. 3 shots from the rifle shot by a lone nut assassin. What do you not see is the motive, the opportunity, and the actual physical evidence here, Your Honor. So to convict people in court, what you need is intent. What was Oswald's intent in committing this crime? What, if anything, did he have to gain? What, if any benefits, did anyone else have to commit the crime? You must prove that he is guilty in court for all these things, Your Honor. But the burden of proof, right? In the United States, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty, because the burden of proof is on prosecution in criminal court cases. If there is a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed a crime, then jurors are instructed to vote not guilty. Only 50% of trials lead to conviction or defendant, and only 25% of trials lead defendant serving a year or more in jail/prison. Because, however, in Oswald's case, he was presumed guilty, like we've established before, Your Honor. And if we take this further, this step was missing on purpose, but why? Why was it missing on purpose? So instead of a true investigation, fake evidence was used to persuade, like this picture, for example. So Oswald's backyard photo, as you can see here, is very peculiar if you look at all these three photos compared side by side, Your Honors, because the difference is in pictures, right? After the police arrested Lee Harvey Oswald for killing President Kennedy, they searched Ruth Payne's home and found a picture of him standing in the backyard. In one hand, he held a rifle, and the other copies of two communist newspapers, The Militant and The Worker. His wife Marina said she had taken the photo in the spring of 1963. So this photo was made public in late February 1964, simultaneously appearing on the cover of Life magazine and on the front page of the Detroit Free Press. Within days, it had appeared in many other publications, but sharp-eyed observers noticed that the photo appeared to have been tampered with since details differed from the publication to publication. In particular, details of the rifle differed. For instance, in the version that appeared on the cover of Life, Oswald's rifle had a sniper scope, but in the version that ran in the Detroit Free Press, the sniper scope was gone. So Oswald put on a fake body. You can see here, if you look at the chin, and you can see the difference, the very clear cut you have in this picture here. So this one photo actually proves that Oswald was innocent, Your Honor. On November 22nd, 1963, the police found several incriminating photos of Oswald posing with the Mannlicher Carcano rifle and a pistol. When the police showed that the pictures of Oswald, he said, "That is not a picture of me, it was my face, but my face has been superimposed. The rest of it is not the picture. The rest of the picture is not me at all, and I've never seen it before." So the problems with this picture point out to these 7 things, in which Marina Oswald testified to the Warren Commission that she took the photos on March 31, 1963. So the photos show a bright sunny day. The bush beside Oswald is in bloom, but in March, such bushes have not yet begun to bloom. So Oswald's head is erect, and the nose casts a V-shaped shadow. In another photo, Oswald's head is slightly cocked, yet the shadow remains the same. The posture of the man is also oddly out of kilter. When one attempts to stand at such an angle, one invariably falls over. So the size of the bodies in both pictures differs. The chin of Oswald in the photos seemed more broader and squarish than the Oswald who was arrested in Dallas, and the weapon Oswald carries was not the one discovered in the TSPD, Your Honor. So again, we have to look at the cut of the chin. You can clearly see below that the chin is a cut and paste job, Your Honor. So the shadow was merely added in too, 100% fake, and even the hand is phony, cut and added onto the right arm, in which the arm is a cut and paste object. So how many people knew about the Payne house in Irving before 22nd? Well, only these 2 people, the FBI and the Dallas police. So the FBI meeting with Ruth Payne on 31st October 1963, an FBI agent, James Hosty, visited Payne's home to discover where Oswald was living. He spoke to both Payne and Marina Oswald about Lee Harvey Oswald. So when Oswald heard about the visit when he went to the FBI office in Dallas, he went and told that Hosty was at lunch. They left him a message in an envelope. So President Kennedy is shot at 12:30. Here's the time when we start to establish it, Your Honors. Which one? JFK is pronounced dead at 1. 2, Officer Tippit is shot dead 1:06 to 15. 3, JFK is announced dead at 1:33. 4, Oswald is arrested in the Texas Theater at 1:40. 5, Oswald in Captain Fritz's office 2:20. And finally 6, the Payne home is searched at 3:30. So this is what Police Chief Curry was talking about here, Your Honor. Again, we won't be showing the videos as we want to make this as short as possible. So is it unusual to go by a person's house by just their name? One of Oswald's arresting officers, Gerald Hill, in which he quotes, "We were trying to get together to decide who was going to make the offense report and get all the little technicalities out of the way when a detective named Richard Stovall and another one, G.F. Rose, came up, and the 4 of us were standing when Captain Fritz walked in." So he walked up to Rose and Stovall and made the statement to them, "Go get a search warrant and go get to some address on 5th Street, and I don't recall the actual street number in Irving, and pick up a man named Lee Harvey Oswald." So, and I asked the captain why he wanted him, and he said, well, he was employed down at the book depository, and he had not been present for a roll call of the employees. And we said, "Captain, we will save you a trip," or to the words of that effect, because there he sits. And with that, he relinquished our prisoner to the Homicide and Robbery Bureau to Captain Fritz. So finally, Detective Guy Rose says, "Mr. Rose, in just a few minutes, Captain Fritz came in, and he instructed me to get 2 men and go to Irving to the Ruth Payne home. So I went immediately." So the November 23rd newspaper story mentions that the backyard photos. This actually proves that Michael Payne claimed the photographs were taken from his home from the day before, right? So where did the police say they got these pictures again? They said they got it from Ruth Payne's garage. The police arrived at the Payne residence at November 22nd, 1963 at 2:30, and the strange facts about the first search of November 22nd, in which Captain Fritz tells the officers to go to Ruth Payne's house. He asked by name, not address. The Dallas PD does not have jurisdiction in Irving in the first place, so Irving PD or the Dallas County Sheriff Department would have had jurisdiction. So why would you search a house that you already knew about in a city that wasn't yours, unless they were a part of the conspiracy as well, Your Honor? In which Michael Payne's statements in the photos, he said his testimony in 1964 only acknowledges seeing a backyard photo at the DPD headquarters on the night of the assassination. So now the problem begins here, Your Honors. The police arrest Oswald at 1:40 for killing President Kennedy, but do not have any evidence at all linking him to the crime. As we've said before, an investigation needs to be a true investigation and not just pin Oswald as the one who did the crime. So no problem. The police go to Ruth Payne's house and get the information they need to tie the two together. So we have something peculiar going on here. They don't have any evidence for convicting Oswald, and they just go to some Ruth Payne's house. And they even say this during that investigation, in which, come in, we've been expecting you. That's very odd, isn't it? Because if you look at that, that's clearly an admission of conspiracy we have there, Your Honors, because they can't give or grant rights to search other people's materials. They can't volunteer or give away of people's materials. And this was done before Oswald was interrogated by a police department without jurisdiction. So we have very odd things going on here. They don't have jurisdiction. They can't even give permission. And now how the police search Oswald's things, they actually got the search warrant after they got Oswald's things. So this is Rose's statements on the November 22nd, in which it was a search of Payne's home, as you can see here, Your Honors, and Ruth Payne's testimony, in which these very things were said. The police arrived in what occurred, and then Mrs. Payne says, I went to the door. They announced themselves as both sheriffs from the sheriff's office and the Dallas police office, showed me at least one package or two. And then I was very surprised. Did you say anything? I said nothing. I think I just dropped my draw. And the man in front of, by the way of the explanation, we have Lee Oswald in custody. He is charged with shooting an officer. This is the first I had any idea that Lee might be in trouble with the police or in any way involved in the day's events. So I asked them to come in, and they said they wanted to search the house. I asked if they had a warrant. They said they didn't. They said they could get the sheriff out here right away with one if I insisted. I said no, that was all right. They could be my guest, and then they did search the house. Nothing was ever said to give permission or consent about searching Oswald's possessions here, Your Honor, because the Warren Commission testimony in which Detective Rose, the 1122 Payne house, you can see that even Miss Marina's Oswald statement on the search, she couldn't even speak English. So it's very odd that we have a perfectly grammatical correct affidavit here for her when she couldn't even speak English. How can someone who didn't speak English write something so perfect in an affidavit? This just proves that this was a setup, Your Honor, a conspiracy, in which, note the police report, here police detectives get permission from Miss Ruth Payne to search her house. Does she have the right to give permission to search Oswald's personal materials? No, she doesn't have that right because this was the law of the land back then. In Chapman v. United States, the court ruled that the landlord's consent is insufficient to search the personal items or belongings. Oh, sorry about that. Hold on. All right. Searching, confinement. Ooh, sorry about that. All right. So we were at Ruth Payne's garage in a testimony, and here I would like to begin here, Your Honor. In fact, Oswald is arrested before the evidence is checked out in the first place. So at 1:33 p.m. at Parkland Hospital, acting White House Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff makes the official announcement of President Kennedy's death to reporters gathered in nurses' classroom at the hospital, in which they quote, President John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 CST today here in Dallas. He died of a gunshot wound to the brain, and I have no other details regarding the assassination of the president. So Oswald was arrested for these three things, right? Without direct evidence tying him to a crime, without a direct witness placing him committing a crime, and without an autopsy or investigation on what caused JFK's death or the direction of the bullets. So the police go back and go get a search warrant in the next day to check this one car garage and house again, Your Honors. So the unwarranted search actually proves the cover-up. The reason why they went there without a search warrant was because in order to obtain a search warrant, the requester had to explain to the court specifically what it is he is looking for. So if they didn't know what they were looking for, they couldn't apply for a search warrant. So they had an unwarranted search, and it was Very peculiar there. So now look at the search warrant here for November 23rd. They obviously gathered the things, and they've got the search warrant after they've had the unwarranted search. So the search warrant obtained by Judge Joe Brown Jr., in which it says the evidence to obtain the search warrant was obtained itself through an illegal search of the house the day before. And Judge Brown should not have issued this warrant at all, because Judge Brown's father will be the judge in the Jack Ruby case. So Judge Brown issues more search warrants on Ruby, Your Honor. So the search warrant issued was on the basis of illegally obtained information. There is no basis for the first illegal search, no basis for the search warrant, and no basis for Lee Harvey Oswald's arrest at 1:40 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963 for the murder of the president. Now compare the facts with Detective Rose's statements. Note the following. 1. He spent 2 hours labeling the evidence from the day before. 2. The backyard picture was used by Dallas police Friday evening. It was not discovered on Saturday. And finally, 3. The police report is based on facts, not in evidence. So here's his actual statements if you want to take a look at it. But here's JFK announced dead at 1:33 p.m., 7 minutes later, in which Oswald was arrested for the murder of JFK at 1:40. As you can see here, clearly without evidence too. So events or conclusions in the Warren Commission prove conspiracy, Your Honor. So let's look at the events and conclusions. 1. Pictures forged or faked previously to their finding with planted evidence that was tampered with. 2. Pictures and information obtained without a warrant and illegal to use in the first place. And finally, 3. Arrest warrant filed out 7 minutes after the official word was announced and before any evidence was obtained, Your Honor. So the police claims it was an open and shut case. It was very peculiar because we do not have a witness who saw him shoot the rifle. So clearly the case against Oswald could not hold in court because the powers to be this case were to make a public believe a person was guilty. Chief of Police Dallas Jesse Curry later said this too, in which, however, in November 22 to 23rd, 1963, this was said about Oswald, in which Jesse Curry said before all these things actually went on, Your Honors. Even D.A. Henry's Wade comments on Friday night, November 22nd, the NBC TV broadcast a press interview with District Attorney Henry Wade, whose comments included these. I figured we have sufficient evidence to convict him. Oswald, of course, and there's no one else but him, because they never tried to search for another person involved in the assassination because they just assumed that Oswald was the killer. But did they really assume, or did they just want to frame it in the first place? So listen to District Attorney Henry Wade. This was taken on Friday, November 22nd, 1963. How can you arrest someone 7 minutes without proper legal techniques and without proving that a person actually committed a crime first? Are you not innocent until proven guilty, Your Honor? Because Henry Wade's own words, and sorry, we'll be showing that video, and also Jerry Curry's statements on the evidence, we don't have any proof that Oswald fired the rifle, and never did. Nobody's yet been able to put him in that building with a gun in his hand. And the evidence, the fingerprints, anyone? There's no fingerprints on the rifle in the first place. And Oswald was presumed to have killed JFK in the court of public opinion, Your Honor. So now, note the homicide report, date 11/23/63, 5:10 p.m. Oswald fingered despite no evidence. So the newspaper and magazine reports this to be true without proving it at all, without evidence. The backyard front page forged picture illegally obtained convicts Oswald in the court of public opinion, and as well as headlines like this, Your Honor. So stories appear immediately for afternoon newspaper. The president is assassinated as Dallas multitude hails him, and before LBJ gets sworn in, Oswald is caught. So public reports of the time, 2 days after the assassination, the New York Times ran a banner headline that read in part, "Police say prisoner is the assassin," with a smaller but likewise front page heading, "Evidence against Oswald described as conclusive." The article quoted Captain Will Fritz of the Dallas Police Homicide Bureau as having said, "We're convinced beyond any doubt that he killed the president. I think the case is cinched." So plus these quotes, Your Honor, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported, police on Saturday said they have an airtight case against pro-Castro Marxist Lee Harvey Oswald as the assassin of the president. So another one, on the front page of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch was the headline, "Dallas Police Insisted Evidence Proves Oswald Kennedy." You have this repeating theme here, Your Honor, of which they keep saying that there is evidence against him, when really they just do this to frame Oswald in the first place. They have no evidence. Any evidence that was used was illegally obtained, so they don't have anything to go on, which means it's just a conspiracy, Your Honor. The press had to either been manipulated or on it since the very beginning, and the police had to be in or on it from the very beginning or manipulated. Oswald was never going to receive a trial from the beginning, which would prove that Oswald was not only the assassin, but that the police were in on it, Your Honor. So now we go to the second point of her. The witnesses see things that report fails to mention. Much of the eyewitness reports that went contrary to the conclusion was either not looked at or failed to be considered. in the first place. So eyewitnesses of what they saw, right? The commission's crew of witness consisted of Howard Brennan and Amos Younes, both of whom they said they saw the man fire a rifle. Robert Jackson and Malcolm Couch, the two photographers riding in the motorcade, who saw the barrel of the rifle being drawn slowly back at the window after the shots, in which Mrs. Earl Campbell, wife of the city mayor, who's also riding a procession, saw a projection from a depository window. And James Crawford, who saw a movement in the window after the shots but could not say for sure whether it was a person whom he had seen. Two additional witnesses are added in the report's chapter, The Assassin, in which they are Ronald Fisher and Robert Edwards, both of whom saw a man without a rifle in the window shortly before the motorcade arrived. So what does this say? Public opinion has Oswald on the 6th floor in the sniper's nest. Yes, of course, but the eyewitnesses were not used, so the story doesn't fit at all, Your Honor. Two other 6th floor gunman witnesses didn't make quite into the relevant section of the report. One, in fact, never made the report at all. Arnold Rowland saw the gunman 15 minutes before the motorcade arrived at the plaza. However, at this time, the man was in that far southwest left window, and Rowland told the commission that another man was occupied in the southeast corner right window. The commission, whose legal eminencies knew that the other man was on the 6th floor at this time, satisfied the legal definition of a conspiracy, sought only to discredit Rowland, rejecting his story and under a section entitled, in which accomplices at the scene of the assassination. Miss Carolyn Walder saw the gunman in the right window shortly before the procession arrived. However, she too saw a second man on the 6th floor, although the accomplice she described was obviously different from Rowland's. So Rowland sprang his information on the commission by surprise. None of the various reports that had ever mentioned the second man, and Mrs. Walter told a second man from the beginning that was totally ignored by the commission, Your Honors. So the timeline doesn't fit at all on the 6th floor at 12:30 p.m. The only way they could get Oswald down to the 2nd floor was by artificially quickening his descent and slowing up the two witnesses' ascent here, Your Honor. And Oswald could not have been in two places at once. So this actually solves the conspiracy. It solves the mystery, Your Honor. So if he could not be in two places, obviously a cover-up is going on, but we've already established that. We have to go further than just that, Your Honor. So if we look into Brennan's testimony on November 22nd, 1963, Brennan was unable to identify Oswald as the man he saw in the window, but picked Oswald as the person in a police lineup who bore the closest resemblance to the gunman. Months later, when he appeared before the commission, Brennan said he could not have made a positive identification at the identification parade, Your Honors. Which now we go to the third point of error. Contradictory evidence was excluded from the whole thing. So the problem is that JFK was hit from the front and the back, Your Honor. The shots came from the front, as you can see from the data here. This is where people think where it came from. So if Oswald is in the front of the school book depository when JFK passes, then he could have not fired the bullets from Kennedy. Now the shots from the front became very important at this instance because newly released document proves frontal shot, Your Honor. So you can see here, you can see that's actually probably that frontal shot I've been talking about. And even the blood spray was faked on film, as you can see from this frame here, Your Honor. And even the blood spray in the limo, it fits with a frontal shot. So the JFK limo was even clean at Parkland. That's tampering of evidence. They should have not have done that. And that, like I've said before, tampering with evidence, very illegal. They probably have some conspiracy. Because the only way a crime scene is clean is, one, the blood spray doesn't fit with the narrative. Two, the Secret Service aren't working with cover-up. And finally, three, Oswald would have nothing to do with it at all. And this proves that he was innocent, Your Honor. So this is the claim here now that we have. Oswald was on the 6th floor and shot the president. So if JFK got shot from both the back and the front, Oswald could not have done it because that would be impossible from just one window. How could a gunshot shoot from the front or the back? We've already established that. So this photo proves that Oswald was not on the 6th floor at all. Because Carolyn Arnold testified that Oswald was on the 1st floor at 12:25. Oswald was shown to be in the doorway when JFK passed by. He could have not have been on the 6th floor at all, and he was seen 90 seconds later in the lunchroom. So again, we have these very peculiar things going on, which is really impossible to fit together in the narrative of the Warren Commission. So within 90 seconds, Lee is drinking a Dr. Pepper in the 2nd floor lunchroom and meets Officer Baker. And Oswald did not do it. This proves it was a conspiracy. Even a British reporter from Cambridge News even received a phone call just 25 minutes before Kennedy was shot and was instructed to call the American embassy in London for some big news before the anonymous tipster hung up, according to an FBI document. After the reporter learned of the assassination, he informed local police about the call, who passed information along to the MI5, Britain's domestic security agency. So MI5 informed the FBI of the call and described of the Cambridge News reporter as a sound and loyal person with no security record. So the claim now that we have here is Oswald hated Kennedy. So Oswald hated Kennedy, that's a very weird thing to say because he praised JFK at a public meeting. On October 25, 1963, Oswald accompanies Michael Paine to the American Civil Liberties Union meeting at which he praises Kennedy for his civil works. So this would infer that even in Soviet Russia, when he had no fear of mercy, he gained admirers for denouncing Kennedy. Oswald never verifiably did in the first place. So Oswald got the job at the TSPD to kill JFK, right? This would be a very weird thing to put into narrative, but it would be very right because he could not have known what would happen when he got the job in the first place, Your Honor. But Oswald could not have been the lone assassin because he would not have the route in the first place. Unless Oswald had aid or instruction, he was unaware of a future presidential motorcade route. As officials claim he was acting by himself, he could not have known until November 19 of this opportunity in Dealey Plaza. The Dallas media did not carry the story with the full route until November 19 at the earliest. The implication of this fact has escaped prior to investigation. If the official timeline is accurate, Oswald has little time to do everything alone in the first place. So here are the questions. The two concepts that Lee Harvey Oswald was doing this alone, right? Taken out by the idea that the two Dallas papers had published two different routes, one on Main Street all the way, and one where they turned down on Houston and then left to Elm. These are the two routes we show here now, Your Honor. This one and the other one on the 21st. So the Dallas Morning News even had one of the routes there on the 22nd, and this is the timeline of which all activity from November 19th to 22nd. We can go here, as you can see, and now we have a summary of Oswald's timeline. So he took the trip announced on September 13, 1963, right? The dates announced on November 4th, 1963, in which the route was announced on December 18th. The route changed on December 19th and published in the newspapers. Oswald didn't have enough time to plan by himself, so Oswald could not have known by himself that the TSPD would be on that route in the first place. There must have been something going on in here, Your Honor. So now we have another claim. Everyone heard 3 shots from the back. Mary Ann Mormon and Jean Hill, who heard 4 or 5 shots, in which the witness statements denied this claim, and they said, again, 4 to 5 shots. So 4 shots prove the conspiracy, and finally, 5 shots prove the conspiracy. So Newman's proved shots from rear and Zapruder film were faked. November 22nd, TV interview of Bill Newman states that 1 shot came from the back behind me, and 2, the first shot hit President Kennedy, and he jumped in the seat of the limo. So here's the human interview if you want to view it later, and here's Will's testimony, of which the shots from the front limo, she says in this video. So the photo has Lee Harvey Oswald in the doorway as JFK passes by. So this one picture proves that the Warren Commission had it wrong when they said these 3 things. That Lee Harvey Oswald was on the 6th floor, that he shot the President Kennedy, and that Lee Harvey Oswald was on the run and killed Officer Tippit. There was no reason to run in the first place for Oswald. So he could not go from the 6th floor to the 2nd floor, but could go from the ground floor to the 2nd. So shots from the front, right? The several police officers on the duty that day who immediately ran towards the knoll on hearing the gunshots as the president reported they were confronted by men, so purporting to be Secret Service agents. And Hoffman's testimony was ignored by the FBI investigators when he voluntarily came forward, but his account was verified by a railroad operator named Lee Bowers, who also observed the shooting from the grassy knoll from the vantage point of a control tower. So here's Chief of Police Jesse Curry's frontal shot of which he talks about, and also Acting Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff at a news conference immediately after, in which Dr. Berkeley told me it is a simple matter of a bullet right through the head. And when he asked where the bullet entered his head, it says it's my understanding that it entered in the temple, the right temple, Your Honor. So LBJ and Hoover covered report cover-up. And also, Dallas County DA Henry Wade and Police Chief Jesse Curry answered press questions at 9:32, 11:23. So this is where the So this is where the cover-up begins in plain sight, Your Honor. So 2 press conferences with as District Attorney Henry, right? Attorney Henry Wade faces the press in these 2 news conferences with President Kennedy. So the first conference took place shortly after Lee was fully charged with JFK's murder, and Oswald was formally charged at 11/26, 1963, and Wade's second news conference occurred in the evening of November after Oswald himself had been shot and killed by Jack Ruby. So the claim that we have here now is Oswald escaped by bus. According to the official story, Oswald leaves the TSPD at 12:33, whereupon he walks several blocks and allegedly boards the bus number 1213, driven by Cecil McWaters, at the corner of Elm and Murphy Streets after the bus, which was heading towards Dealey Plaza, becomes stuck in traffic. So Oswald allegedly departs the bus and walks over to the Greyhound bus station at the corner of Jackson and Lamar Streets, where he boards cab number 36, driven by William Whaley. At the time is now allegedly 12:48 in this narrative here, Your Honor. So Roger Craig actually remembers that there was a man standing on the steps of the book depository building, and he turned to me and said, "I'm with the Secret Service." So the man was about 40 years old, sandy haired, with a distinct cleft in his chin, and he was well dressed in a gray business suit. I was naive enough at the time to believe that the only police were actually officers after all, and this was the command post. I gave him the information. He showed little interest in the person's evening. However, he seemed extremely interested in the description of the Rambler. So here, Craig may have had an encounter with a conspirator, and according to the warrant reports, he assigned the motorcade to that place in the hospital. So none stayed at the scene that there was the shooting. None of them stayed. So more of Craig. Fast forward several hours later, Craig heard an arrest being made in connection with the shooting of Officer J.D. Tippett. As he told the Warren Commission, "I kept thinking about the subject that had run and got in the car, so I called him Captain Fritz's office and talked to one of his officers and told him what I saw and gave him a description of the man." So the suspect, of course, was Lee Harvey Oswald in this case. So Mr. Craig, Captain Fritz, then asked him about he said, "What about the station wagon?" And the suspect interrupted him and said, "That station wagon belongs to Mrs. Payne. I believe is what he said, and don't try to tie her into this. She had nothing to do with this." So here we go into the fourth point of error, Your Honor, in which Dr. Jerry Croft, PhD, did a statistical comparison of the cause of death of the witnesses connected with the JFK murder and the general population of the U.S. What he found was really stunning here, Your Honor. The cause of death by percentage of 78 people who were connected to the JFK assassination are as follows: 37% murder, 23% accidental death, 17% suicide, and 22% natural causes. Now, the cause of death of the general population in 1970 are as follows: murder, less than 1%, 9% accidental death, 1% suicide, and 89% natural causes. So Penn Jones we have these series of videos in which they have these very mysterious deaths, right? We even have these things about their mysterious deaths, in which Karen Kupcinet, TV's host daughter, who was overheard telling of JFK's death prior to 11/23, the first person to die linked to the case was Karen Kupcinet. So in his book, Forgive My Grief, W. Penn Jones reports that a few days before the assassination, Karen Kupcinet, 23, was trying to place a long-distance telephone call from Los Angeles area. According to reports, the long-distance reporter heard Ms. Kupcinet scream into the telephone that President Kennedy was going to be killed. Karen's body was discovered on the 30th of November 1963, in which the police estimated that she had been dead for 2 days. The New York Times reported that she had been strangled. Her actor boyfriend, Andrew Prine, was the main suspect, but he was never charged with murder, and the crime remains unsolved. So we have very peculiar deaths going on here when they were connected to the case, Your Honor, in which even Grant Stockade had a very peculiar death, and he was a close friend of John F. Kennedy. And also Dorothy Killigan, and also Margaret Smith. Dorothy Kilgallen, a crime reporter of the New York Journal, obtained a private interview with Jack Ruby. She told friends that she had information that would break the case wide open. Aware of what had happened to Bill Hunter and Jim Cully, she handed her interview notes to her friend Margaret Smith. On 8th November 1965, Kilgallen was found dead. It was reported she had committed suicide, and her friend Margaret Smith died 2 days later. Very interesting what we have going on here. And Roger Craig, he was on duty in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. After hearing the firing of President John F. Kennedy, he ran towards the grassy knoll where he interviewed witnesses up to the shooting. About 15 minutes later, he saw a man running from the back door of the Texas Book Depository down the slope on Elm Street. He then got into a Nash station wagon. Craig saw the man again in the office of Captain Will Fritz, and it was the recently arrested Lee Harvey Oswald. So when Craig told the story about a man being picked up by the station wagon, Oswald replied, "The station wagon belongs to Mrs. Payne. Don't try to tie her into this. She had nothing to do with it." That same quote shows up again, Your Honor, in which Craig was also same with Samuel Weitzman when the rifle was found on the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository. He insisted that the rifle was a 7.65 monster, not a man like her Carcano. Roger We keep continuing on with this testimony here, Your Honor, which in 1967, Roger G. Craig went to New Orleans and was a prosecution witness at the trial of Clay Shaw. Later that year, he was shot while walking to a car park. The bullet only grazed his head, but in 1973, a car forced Craig's car off the mountain road. So he was badly injured, but he survived the accident. In 1974, he was surviving another shooting in Waxahachie, Texas, in which the following year he was seriously wounded when his car engine exploded. Craig told his friends that the mafia had decided to kill him. Craig was found dead on 15th May 1975, and it was later decided that he had died as a result of self-inflicted gunshot wounds. So another one having a mysterious death, Your Honors. We keep continuing these series and streaks of mysterious deaths, and even we have a picture here, right? You can see obviously this was not Oswald in the picture at all. So all these things corroborate the statement that this was a conspiracy after all. And finally, on to the fifth point of error, in which the entire case falls apart against Oswald, Your Honor. So the murder of J.D. Tippit. We see that Myers reportedly omits important information that contradicts his conclusion in the first place. On several occasions, Myers buries important contrary information in his endnotes, in which he surely knows most readers will not bother to study. So Myers repeatedly reaches conclusions that are contradicted by his own raw data. So Myers frequently relies on interview summaries, but he never mentions that numerous witnesses complained that those summaries were inaccurate and incomplete. And finally, Myers fails to mention that any witnesses changed their stories in the favor of the lone gun incident scenario by the time they testified before the Warren Commission months after they give the initial statements. So the Tippit murder, now we go on to that. J.D. Tippit was one of the few officers in Dallas police force who would not be called to dearly positive to help investigate the assassination, of which my co-counsel will further address the Tippit murder, Your Honor. And also the problem and Oswald was in the Texas theater. Now it comes to two wallets, right? So Bob Barrett claims that Captain W.R. Westbrook asked him about the names Oswald and Hill while he was thumbing through the IDs of a wallet he was holding at the Tippit scene. So interesting to note here, Your Honor, was that Captain Westbrook was in charge of hiring officers and had a desk job. However, on this day, he was here at the Texas theater, and TSBD later go to Vietnam and other things. Lee Harvey Oswald now has two identity, in which it's Lee Harvey Oswald on the left and Alex Hittle on the right. It's very suspicious having two wallets. So both wallets were found on the day, in which one was on Lee Harvey Oswald and one was at the Tippit murder scene. So do people carry two wallets with them when they commit crimes? Let's start asking questions here about the case in order to further crack this down. So would a person who just shot the president carry two wallets with him? It's very suspicious. So, but would they throw down the casings on the ground? Would they have even stayed in Dallas in the first place? And what is the chance of catching a person in 60 minutes after killing the president? If Oswald did not have two wallets, then this proves a conspiracy, which is government forged, Your Honor. So now we have these four questions to be answered. How does all of this take place? How does an unemployed worker shot the president, then escapes by bus in a cab to his rooming house? How does he pick up a pistol, kills Officer Tippit, but yet surrenders to the police in the theater? How does he die 2 days later by the hands of Jack Ruby? The last question is the best to conclude on, Your Honor, in which the man on the right above is FBI James Bookout. He is the one who got filmed. The man on the right is above is FBI James Bookout. He is the one who got filmed in the so-called live footage of Ruby shooting Oswald, so-called live footage of Ruby shooting Oswald. So we have very peculiar things going on here, Your Honors. But very little is what you have known before. Now we have these irrefutable facts I've shown you today. There's two Rubys, two directions of shots, two wallets, two political victims, and finally, two Oswalds. Now the final conclusion, or just one conclusion we have here, Your Honor, was that Lee Harvey Oswald was framed and was not guilty of killing President of the United States, JFK. Here is the closing statement I would like to bring now. The problems here are sixfold. 1, the arrest was made before the evidence was obtained. 2, search warrants issued were based upon illegal information. 3, evidence planted the backyard photo. And 4, the shots came from many directions. 5, Oswald was placed at 12:30 in the doorway of the TSBD. And finally, 6, the Warren Commission assumed guilt. They did not prove it at all. So I would like to conclude on all these matters, Your Honor, in which if please overturn the court of public opinions, because Oswald is not guilty for any of these things, Your Honors. He was framed from the very start of there being conspiracy before the shooting ever happened in the first place. And there's still problems occurring today with this information that we have, Your Honor. So if there are no more further questions, I will let my co-counsel speak. Go to your slide. Gotcha. So it should be here in your drive.
Jack, I'm on the air. Can you?
All right. Just make sure to put it on present mode.
Sure, you got it. You got it.
Good morning, and I will begin on the second speech, which is mostly going over the killing of Officer Tippit. I'll give it a second so that it can. Okay. So the Warren Commission has made 4 major flaws. 1, they stated that Oswald killed John F. Kennedy. 2, they stated that Oswald tried to flee the country. 3, Officer Tippit knew to go to Oswald's boarding house somehow. And 4, the Warren report cannot be correct unless Tippit was involved in the plot. Now, Oswald was not seen on the 6th floor of this picture, in which a witness took at around 12:25. Note that the witness was not standing directly in front of the 6th floor window. A was marked the spot of the 6th floor alleged sniper's nest. B, it marked the spot of the open window on the 5th floor. C, note that the President Kennedy's limo was about 7 or 8 minutes behind schedule and was supposed to be at the trademark at 12:30. And D, if the sniper was on the 6th floor, the window was closed. Now, since the window was closed, there was no possible way that a sniper could have prepared in under 5 minutes. Now, yes, it was behind, but no one had any way of knowing that. And considering the fact that the president was supposed to be on his way in about 5 minutes, you would think that if someone really was trying to shoot President Kennedy from that 6th floor window, then they would have been more prepared, and the window would have at least been open. Now, this is a photo of Lee Harvey Oswald on the doorway as JFK passed. Now, how can a man be on the main floor and runs up 5 or 6 flights of stairs in order to go and kill the president to a window that was still closed? Now, simply said, if Oswald did not shoot Kennedy, why would he shoot Tippit? Now, at 1:43 p.m., Sergeant Pete Barnes pulled up at the crime scene and began to take pictures of what had taken place with Officer Tippit. Now, note that the time was 1:43. That is 3 minutes after they arrested Lee Harvey Oswald and the Texas leader for killing the same police officer. Now, JFK was announced dead at 1:33 p.m. Just 7 minutes later, Oswald was arrested for the murder of John F. Kennedy at about 1:40 without any evidence. And now here we have the police report, which just states that they were arresting Lee Harvey Oswald for the murder of JFK and as you can see on the arrest report, there was no evidence to be held on that. Now, Oswald could not be arrested at 1:40 unless it was a conspiracy. This is because 1, no identification to the weapons used were made to connect them with Lee Harvey Oswald. 2, no evidence tying the 2 crimes together was established yet. And 3, there was no evidence in the police's hands yet. Witnesses, now right at this time, I'll take some time to look at the witnesses and see what they said around, what they saw before 1:40, the time that Officer Tippit was killed. Now, Now, we're not actually going to go through any of the videos because, again, we have to make this as short as possible, but you can go through them at your own time. This man, he was talking about the atomic weapon that was used to shoot Tippit and how he says that the shells didn't really match up. Here we have Helen Markham, in which she stated, as if you cross-apply my co-counsel's statements, she stated that she closed her eyes and basically put her hands over her eyes while he was coming towards her, because she was scared because she heard bullets everywhere. And this is one of a man discussing how he could, discussing about how he could not identify him unless he was the person shooting himself. Now, discussing the Tippit murder, taking statements from the selected witnesses. The Dallas Police and the Warren Commission decided to take information from the selected witnesses who saw or said they saw the exact same things as the foregone conclusion. Now, Miss Clemens came out of the house when she heard gunshots that resulted in the murder of Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit. Miss Clemens observed 2 men, one short and heavier and another one tall and thin, and said that she observed the shorter man with the gun, and the unarmed man was the one who fled down Patton Avenue. Now, here's Miss Clemens, basically her statement, which you can go over at your later on. Now, if we were to believe in the Warren Commission, then that means that we believe that we arrested the killer of the president 7 minutes after the official announcement of his death. That means that we arrested the killer of Officer Tippit 3 minutes before the police show up to investigate to even investigate the crime scene. And 3, the arrest report states that he killed both gentlemen before the crime was even investigated. So if obviously none of these really piece together, the time frame is very off, and there's no way that anybody could gain any sort of evidence, which I will go on more about later on in my speech in this presentation. So basically, we cannot believe the Warren Commission. Witnesses had Lee Harvey Oswald in the Texas Theater. Now, Butch Burroughs was a ticket collector and somebody who was working on at the concession stands of the Texas Theater on November 22nd, 1963, and which he stated that he saw Oswald come into the theater between 1 and 1:07 p.m., making Oswald's alleged 1:15 shooting of Officer Tippit impossible. And here is just basically an interview with the police and the witness, police witness Detective Bentley, in which he stated he found the driver's license, Lee Harvey Oswald's driver's license in his billfold. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald had never had a driver's license, so we're very confused as to how he could have found his driver's license. 7 minutes later, Oswald was arrested for the murder of John F. Kennedy at 1:40, and again, here's the police report. And this just, again, goes into Officer Gerald Hill's report on the arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald at the Texas Theater on the day that it occurred. Now, Bernard J. Hare's testimony. Now, Bernard Hare owned Bernie's Hobby House, which was located 2 doors east of the Texas Theater. Mars interviewed Hare in the summer of 1987, and the following was revealed in the interview. Basically, what he stated was that he saw Lee Harvey Oswald being arrested through the back of the Texas Theater. Later, he was told that Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested through the front. He saw he heard many people talking about it throughout the town, and he was very confused due to the fact that he saw a man who looked exactly like Lee Harvey Oswald being arrested through the back. And he even stated, "I do not know who I saw arrested that day," and I guess neither do we. Now, this is another interview discussing about how Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested on the main floor, which again does not go in hand with Hare's testimony. Now, 2 Oswalds were arrested that day, and this just leads to further proof that there was a conspiracy. Now, the autopsy request signed at the hospital. The Warren Commission claimed that the shooting of the Officer Tippit took place between 1:08 and 1:15 p.m. on Friday, November 22nd, 1963. However, here in the request for the autopsy signed at the Methodist Hospital, they had the time of death at exactly 1:15. Now, here's again the hospital report. You can see that he was declared dead at 1:15. So the Warren Commission states that it was between 1:08 and 1:15. They did not even actually go through all of the evidence that was handed to them. We can't really trust the Warren Commission if they're still going to feed us lies. And here is a video that just basically goes through the fact that evidence was planted at the Tippit scene, which was Oswald's wallet and a jacket. Now, this was found shortly before his arrest for killing Officer Tippit and John F. Kennedy. Captain Westbrook was at the scene of the billfold recovery and at the scene of the jacket recovery. Captain Westbrook led Lee Harvey Oswald out of the front of the Texas Theater. Now, Captain Westbrook was the head of personnel of downtown Dallas. He had really no reason to be going around town trying to find evidence and then again arresting Lee Harvey Oswald. That's not in his job description. Captain Westbrook was kind of a very strange character. The famous John F. Kennedy researcher Bill Simpich concludes that he thinks that he was involved with framing Oswald for the assassination. This is because basically Westbrook and Hill, which I will get to later on, were at every scene where evidence was found. Now, after November 22nd of 1963, Captain Westbrook was appointed Captain Westbrook's role as a police advisor in South Vietnam meant that he was working for the United States Agency for Internal Development, which therefore meant that he was working for the CIA. So again, right after the John F. Kennedy assassination and the killing of Officer Tippit, Captain Westbrook was moved out of the States. He went to Vietnam and began to work with the CIA. Captain Westbrook and Sergeant General Hill. They were in the personnel office at the time of the shooting of John F. Kennedy. Sergeant Hill was transferred to work under Captain Westbrook in October of 1963, which was about a month before the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the killing of Officer Tippit. Now, after shooting, they left, and after the shooting, they left Captain Westbrook's office to go to the Texas School Book Depository building, in which Sergeant Hill was one of the policemen who found the shell casings on the 6th floor. After finding the bullet casings, Captain Westbrook and Sergeant Hill drove to the Tippit murder scene. At that time, Captain Westbrook recovered the wallet of Lee Harvey Oswald, complete with his IDs and a driver's license, which again, as my co-counsel stated, there was more than one wallet with more than one ID, in which nobody should really have. There was only ever one ID on record, and there was no way that a driver's license could have been found due to the fact that he had no driver's license. This is how the police, but going back to the point, due to the fact that they found his wallets with his IDs, that's how the police somehow knew to look for Tippit's killer, which they concluded somehow was Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, Sergeant Hill and Captain Westbrook, it's not a coincidence that Hill transferred to the Personnel Bureau at in the same month in which Oswald obtained his job at the Texas School Book Depository. It would clearly stand to reason that Hill was transferred, most likely by Westbrook, to the Personnel Bureau so that he and Westbrook could discuss any planning of the assassination without having to do so in public or by telephone, which they could have been overheard or just monitored in general. It is entirely possible that Hill admitted to the FBI that he had transferred to the Personnel Bureau in October 1963 because he didn't realize or believe that he would bring him under suspicion. This could also explain why Hill didn't hesitate to tell the Warren Commission that he was on a special assignment with the Personnel Bureau. It is also curious that the DPD Personnel Assignments booklet in November 1963 lists Hill as being as a patrol division, in which he hadn't really ever been before. Now, moving on to the planting of more evidence. Now, Oswald maintained the entire time that Oswald was in custody of the police, he maintained the idea that he did not shoot anyone or even threaten anyone. Now, Westbrook and Hill showed up at the Tippit crime scene just in time to be involved in the arrest of Oswald in the Texas theater. Two important pieces of evidence to tie Oswald to the crime appear only after Westbrook and Hill show up. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that there were really no shell casings or IDs or anything to tie Lee Harvey Oswald to any of the killings until after Westbrook and or Hill showed up to any of the crime scenes. Now, here's basically the schedule of the movement of Sergeant Hill's day on the day of the assassination and killing of Officer Tippit. Now, at 12:30, he was at Westbrook's office. Around 12:47, he was en route to the Texas School Book Depository in car 207, which was the same car that will appear again outside of Oswald's rooming house, which my co-counsel went over in his presentation. At 1:17, he discovered the shell casings on the 6th floor. At 1:30, the Tippit murder scene. At the Tippit murder scene, he discovered shells there as well. And at 1:40, the arrest of Oswald at the Texas theater took place. This is a very fast-moving. This is a very fast-moving schedule in which it took about an hour for Lee Harvey Oswald to be charged with a murder that no real evidence was there to tie him, which again I went over earlier in my presentation. It's clear here that anywhere that Sergeant Hill or Westbrook went, evidence just somehow appeared. So either they got really lucky that day, or it was a conspiracy that they were involved in. Now, first, we're going to discuss the pistol. Now, the pistol was discovered after the scuffle. The police claim that Oswald shouted, "This is it." Sergeant Hill wrote up in the police report of this incident and was the only policeman who was on the scene of the bullet casings in the Texas School Book Depository, the Tippit murder scene, and the Oswald's arrests. Second, Oswald's jacket. Now, Oswald was allegedly discarded a light gray zipper jacket in the parking lot behind the Texaco service station on the Jefferson Boulevard after he allegedly shot Tippit. Now, the Warren Commission credited the discovery of the jacket to Westbrook. He had in fact stated that he did not find it. According to Westbrook, the jacket was pointed out by him by either some other officer. Further on during his testimony, Westbrook explained that some officer, I'm sure it was an officer, I still can't be positive, pointed the jacket out to me, and it was laying slightly under the rear of one of the cars. Isn't it strange that Westbrook and Hill both keep on popping up in the as the evidence appears on that day? Now, which way makes more sense here? There are only two things that could possibly be true about this investigation, and that's either that one, Captain Westbrook and Sergeant Hill were just extremely lucky all day on November 22nd, 1963, being at the right place in the right time all day long, or two, Captain Westbrook and Sergeant Hill were part of the planned and direct cover-up of the plant of evidence on Lee Harvey Oswald, which would be a conspiracy. Now, this is some of General Hill's background. General Lynn Jerry Hill was a sergeant working at a desk job at Dallas Police Headquarters when he was thrust into the spotlight on November 22nd, 1963. When he learned that President John F. Kennedy had been shot, Mr. Hill raced across downtown Dallas on the Texas Corporate Depository. He was one of the three lawmen who located the sniper's nest and the three spent shell casings near the 6th floor window. He was one of the several men at the Officer Tippit murder scene and later that day, Mr. Hill handcuffed and accused of the accused assassin, which was Lee Harvey Oswald, which he was arrested at the Texas Theater in Oakland. Again, this made him the only man in Dallas to be at all three events in person at important times of that day. Before entering the Dallas Police Department in 1955, he worked for the Dallas Times Herald newspaper and the WBAP-TV. Again, this was the car that showed up at the Texas School Book Depository and then was later outside of Oswald's boarding house. Again, Gerald Hill was the one driving this car. Now, 1:40 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, these are the things that the police knew. There were no ballistic tests. There was either a weapon or there wasn't. There were no eyewitnesses to the shootings. There was no lineup. There was no evidence. But at 1:40, the Dallas Police Department did arrest Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, how can they arrest a man when they have no evidence at all to tie anybody to the murder, let alone Lee Harvey Oswald? Again, here's the police. This is a police arrest Oswald for the murders of Tippit and JFK, and we can see again what he's being charged with. And this was Gerald Hill's accounting of what happened that day. Again, you can go through it, go over it in your own time. Again, this is a 30-minute video, so I don't really think we should make this longer than it has to be. This is another one of Sergeant Hill discussing the 3 bullet casings that he found that day. And this is a video about Sergeant Hill about what he saw whenever, basically his point of view of what happened at the time in which Lee Harvey Oswald was being arrested at the Texas Theater. And these are Oswald's own words on the subject of the killing, in which he basically stated that he had no part in it. Now, let's review a few things. 1, for Tippit to have been murdered by Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald would have had to shot the president, in which he did not. 2, for Tippit to have been murdered by Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald was trying to escape Dallas. 3, the Dallas police go search a house in another city without a warrant, greeted by the door by a lady who said that they were expected, and were told to go to the house by the address, but by the name of the person who owned the house. Here are the 2 reports in which police had only 2 bullet casings and 1 live bullet on November 22nd, 1963, which clearly providing a conspiracy and not and don't really bring Oswald to court. Again, these are just the reports which discuss the bullet casings. The USSR thoughts on the murder. Now, the CIA notes on the May 1964 conversion of the Soviet leader who said he didn't believe in American security was too inept, that Kennedy was killed without a conspiracy. Now, he believed that the Dallas Police Department to be an accessory to the assassination. The CIA source got the impression that the chairman had some dark thoughts about the American right wing being behind this conspiracy. One source said that Oswald and Ruby were both mad and acted on his own. He said that flatly that he did not believe this and that, again, it was a conspiracy within the government, basically explaining that this case was cinched. Now, the CIA admits that Oswald was trained by them. Now, here's the what was supposed to be a confidential CIA report discussing basically Lee Harvey Oswald's involvement with the government when it came to the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Officer Tippit. Now, Oswald not alone. Government said Oswald was not alone if he was a part of this crime. And the government said so about 40 years ago. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, when they ruled that there was a high probability that there was more than one shooter involved in the JFK murder, and that the assassination was a result of conspiracy. Again, the government admitted to this. Now, some of the help could have been the police. Look at the statement of November 23rd, 1963, that reflected the following misstatements. 1. Oswald told them his possessions were on the garage of Ruth Payne's home. 2. Captain Fritz got a search warrant. 3. The home was searched. 4. 2 photos of Oswald holding the murder weapons were found. Now, all of this was obtained the day before without a search warrant, which again could have been planted and basically can be seen as complete lies. Again, here are the interviews with Lee Harvey Oswald on November 23rd. Now, why would Captain Fritz lie? Now, his own people testified that they got the materials from Irving on Friday, not Saturday. The search warrant was gotten after the fact. The search warrant was obtained by the wrong police department. The evidence would not have been allowed in court or trial. Was this the reason? Knowing that this case would not go to trial to be the reason why this investigation took this road. Maybe look at who Fritz was. He was an FBI agent. James Hody was at the Payne home on October 28th, talking about Oswald. He knew that about Oswald, but never told Captain Fritz. Now, FBI James Bookout was the person who shot Oswald 2 days later, which again my co-counsel went through on his presentation. Now, the FBI questioned Oswald on November 22nd, 1963, which show up in other places in this plot, which again, here's a little overview of what occurred that day. Oswald was not alone. The government admitted to being a part of it. And now this goes against the Warren report that found the following. The commission found that Lee Harvey Oswald, 1, owned and possessed the rifle used to kill President Kennedy and wound Governor Connally. 2, bought this rifle into the depository building in the morning of the assassination. 3, was present at the time of the assassination at the window from which the shots were fired. 4, killed Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit in an apparent attempt to escape. 5, resisted arrest by drawing a fully loaded pistol and attempting to shoot another police officer. 6, lied to the police after his arrest concerning important substantive matters. 7, attempted in April 1963 to kill Major General Edwin A. Walker. And 8, possessed the capability with a rifle which would have enabled him to commit the assassination. On the basis of these findings, the commission was concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin of John F. Kennedy. Now we're going to count things that do not add up, which was 1, there are two or three wallets. That's no one carries that many wallets around with that many IDs. 2, 1 or 2 Oswalds. Again, 2 Oswalds were arrested that day. Both at the Texas theater, which only further proves the conspiracy. 3, the atomic weapon or a pistol. There's no real answer from the Warren Commission. 4, the time frame, again, does not add up. 5, escaping or going home. 6, Hill and Westbrook, which there's a lot of evidence that they planted all the evidence that was found to better go in hand with the conspiracy. Now, we've asked you not to convict Lee Harvey Oswald. He did not commit these crimes, and if he was a part of these crimes, he was not the one who committed them alone. This was a conspiracy involved with the government. Now, with that, I conclude.
Right. So when I mentioned how Oswald said that that was Ruth Payne's, I never actually thought to actually corroborate that with the two Oswald statements. And now that you're saying it, actually looks very interesting. It actually fits in with the time for the Warren Commission. It lets them signal the second Oswald, as you said, and it actually fits in with the narrative that was given to the people that day that Lee Harvey Oswald did all of this acting alone. So I would find it very how should I say this? I've never even thought to do it like that.
You know, Jim, if I can interject something here really quick.
Sure.
Also, if you look at the what took place in Captain Fritz's office when he tells the officers to go to Ruth Payne's house. They don't say the address. They say go to Ruth Payne's house. And then you mentioned this other two. These all start corroborating that the police and everybody else may have already known all about this. And I know the FBI agent had to because he was out there on October 28th. So Ruth Payne has to play a lot more important role than what it was ever let out to be.
He was responsible for getting Lee the job at the book depository, so she was involved in setting him up as the patsy. And the fact that she would grant permission, you know, for the search, even knowing they were coming in advance, is further incriminating evidence of the complicity to frame Lee.
Jim, I would like to add, I'm sorry to interrupt, I would like to add also that Michael Payne was overheard that night in a telephone conversation speaking to somebody and speaking to Ruth, actually, when he called the house that night. And he was very, very candid about it. He said, you know, we know, both of us know who's behind all of this, okay? And that's something that's never been explained. Go ahead.
Yes. Madison, I thought your discussion about Westbrook and Hill was simply excellent, and that you did indicate, I thought, that Hill had been transferred to be working directly with Westbrook. Are we still connected to the studio?
Yes.
To be working with Westbrook so they could plan out together the steps they would take to incriminate him. The two wallets is obviously very damning. That Westbrook doesn't quite understand how the jacket sewed up. It's all suggested that the two of them were in fact planting the evidence. I thought this was all really simply excellent, that the amount of work, the energy you'd invested in doing research in the relatively brief time since the last presentation was virtually spectacular. I'm very, very impressed by both of your efforts. Good work. Well done.
Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from people like yourself. If you could give us a shortened version, I guess, of your presentation, because the recordings are good now, so we'd like to keep it all for posterity on your presentation.
You mean of last time, Mike?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Let me see if I can pull it up. I'm going to have to set up to do it. Give me just 1 second here. Larry, go ahead and comment.
In the meantime, first of all, the the young man's name, because I have Madison, but the other
Lance.
Right, Lance Belderol.
Lance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Lance. Okay, good. Okay, now see, I logged in a little late. That's why I'm asking. Well, you know, you put a lot of really, really good information, you know, and I really like the way that you started to cite precedent, you know, because that's exactly what you're supposed to do in a court of law. You know, you're supposed to be factual and analytical. You cannot jump to conclusions, you know, because that's for the jury to decide, right? And what you want to do is exactly what you started to do. You started to cite precedent, okay, court cases, which is really, really good. But we need to expand that into other areas, okay? Now, the backyard photos is really excellent, but you know that we have an update on that where we have done not just, you showed the Bosco White overlay on the face, but now we have done the entire physique, you know, the torso and everything, and it matches perfectly. I've done an entry in my blog there that's really covers all the aspects of this, and in fact even goes further and talks about how Roscoe White was had been trained in photography, was an expert in altering people's faces and not the body, okay, and he was even proud of his abilities to do that, and a lot of other really interesting aspects of Roscoe White's life. Okay, now I like the part, the illegal search, which I just mentioned, you know, the precedent and everything. Now, you covered the point about that they had been expecting them, and I added that Michael Payne that night spoke on the telephone with Ruth and said, we both know who was responsible. And, you know, what is admissible and not as admissible, that's excellent stuff to cover. Now, you talked about the affidavits, and you got, and both of you include affidavits, and just a little word of caution, yes. Within a reasonable amount, okay, but because let me just say this: if you look at the affidavits that Patsy Collins subscribed, okay, and you look at the so-called signatures of the people that are giving these affidavits, you will know that they're the exact same handwriting. You know, so a lot of these people did not sign these affidavits, and like you say, you know, a lot of this stuff was made up, you know, by the Dallas Police Department. So that's something.
Hey, Larry, on Margarita Oswald, she could not understand English, but yet her affidavit was written in perfect.
Yeah, Marina. Yeah, Marina, of course. Yeah, yeah, that's a great example also. When you start to analyze the Dallas Police Department's actions that day, you have to take into consideration that the Dallas Police Department was dancing to the FBI's tune all along. They were, in fact, the Dallas Police Department had their investigation, you know, going on the way it was supposed to be done. But Hoover and the FBI came down on Dallas, and they confiscated all records. They took over the investigation. They said Oswald is guilty. We're going to handle this, and you know, and they totally removed the Dallas police from the investigation, and they told the Dallas police and District Attorney Wade what to say. Okay, and so that's something that needs to be considered. Now, about the eyewitnesses, you know that at least 54 people are on record as having testified either in the Warren Commission or in interviews, statements and stuff, that they saw and heard shots from the front of the limousine. Okay, so it's a lot more than just a couple of people. We're talking about probably half of the people that were in Dealey Plaza that day. Even people that were in the doorway, like Billy Lovelady and Bill Shelley, they went running to the railroad yards, you know, where everybody else was going. Jean Hill, you know, she ran up the stairs. She went chasing for a gunman, you know, and so on. And Roger Craig, you know, you mentioned Roger Craig. He's one of my heroes, because Roger Craig maintained, you know, exactly what you were talking about. Both of you mentioned him. And, you know, Roger Craig, the year before, had been nominated and won an award for excellency, you know, as a law enforcement officer. You know, so, you know, then from, you know, one year to the next, you know, his whole life, you know, is appended, you know, and he, you know, ends up, you know, like you said, you know, committing suicide, because, you know, that's something that, you know, I don't believe in either. Now, you mentioned Arnold Rowland. I just want to mention about Arnold Rowland. He was a high school student like both of you, and he was standing there with his wife. He married very, very young, and he was still in high school, and he was there with his wife Barbara. And even though Barbara was a little nearsighted, she could see, you know, what Rowland also saw, you know, which were, you know, people there in two people in the east, southeast, and also, like you say, on the other side, you know, of the floor. And how did they go about dealing with him? Well, they did what you mentioned. They tried to discredit him. So he's another of the witnesses that they did try to discredit. And they even went to his high school, you know, and checked out his high school records and everything, you know. And they you know, so that's how, you know, this whole MO is starting to, and there's just too many coincidences, you know, like you mentioned, you know. Now, about the washing of the limo. You also have to add that they took John Connolly's clothes, you know, and they sent him to the cleaners right away. They confiscated them, and, you know, that's it, you know, and all this evidence is being destroyed, you know, which I think is instrumental in building a case, because a lot of this stuff is, like both of you have mentioned, is not admissible, period. If a prosecutor tries to bring this up, you know, he's not gonna stand 30 seconds. You know, a judge is just gonna throw it out. Okay, now just one. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Larry, I had a question. If you concede that point there, wouldn't that also be a strong point to prove conspiracy? Because from the get-go, they knew that they never could build a legal case.
Of course. And just a little word of caution here. Sometimes you both go into conclusions that would not be allowed in a court of law. Like, you can't say a government's forged, you know, or you can't say the government lied or the DPD lied. You know, you have to present the facts and let the jury decide, you know, based on what you were presenting them. Okay. Now, Madison, you know, tremendous. Also, you know, the thing about the driver's license, I wanted to add, in Louisiana, it's known that the motor vehicle agency, they purged all of Lee Oswald's driver's license records. Okay, and there are witnesses that there are documents that show that these witnesses, you know, testified to this, you know, in interviews, you know, and these are people that were never brought before the Warren Commission, obviously, because this would have shown, you know, how all of this frame, you know, occurred. And now this Bernie Hare, who saw Lee Oswald taken out the back alley. Well, if you've been to the Texas Theater, the alley is actually on the side. Okay, so this happened. When this happened, not only were other cops there waiting, but Bill Alexander, the assistant district attorney, was there. And there's another interesting point that you brought up, Madison, and I wanted to expand a little bit on that. And what you're doing in analyzing the movements of these Dallas Police Department officers is right on. It's spot on. Okay, and when you question why would Westbrook be there arresting Oswald? Well, he wasn't the only one who was there. Paul Bentley, who was in that prominently, you know, shown in that photograph arresting Oswald, you know, tussling with Oswald, you know, into the car, you know, outside the Texas Theater. He was the polygraph. He was head of the polygraph department. Okay, so what would he be doing? You know, doing what, you know, regular policemen should have been doing. So I think that's an incredibly important point that you bring up, Madison. Now, also, these cops, you know, like you said, they were all at the three most important events. Okay, yes, but you also have to, now we know that Roscoe White was also he was at the search of the Payne's house. You know, he was at the Tippit murder scene, you know, and now we're starting to get a better idea, a better feel for what Roscoe White's involvement was in all this. And like I said, going after these, scrutinizing the movements of these police officers is a field right now that is pretty open. I don't know of anybody that's really tried to do this. And I would go on and research this further. I would encourage you to go ahead and do that, because there's not that much out there, you know, right now. Now, to give you an example, Gus Rose, and I put this up on my blog a few months ago. Gus Rose was involved. If you go and research Randy Adams, he was framed for a murder right there in Dallas. Well, Gus Rose tried to frame him, and he tried in an interrogation. He actually tried to put a gun in his hands, you know, so the fingerprints would be on the gun. Okay, so and also District Attorney Wade prosecuted him, and he knew he was innocent, and this conviction was overturned later on. But the same players were using the same MO as with Lee Oswald, and that's why I bring this up in my blog, because we're talking about the same players, and this Rose guy who helped frame Randy Adams. They wouldn't even allow him a phone call, okay, which is exactly what they did to Lee Oswald. So you see this whole thing sort of like they were used to. This is something that the Dallas Police Department had done before, obviously with Lee Oswald, and you know, and in light of all of these convictions by Wade that have been overturned recently, you know, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, another guy that was at all the events was Hugh Ainsworth, okay, and he was a reporter who is really we all know that he's agency connected, and he's been one of these reporters that have all from day one reported that Lee Oswald was a lone assassin, you know, and he's been you know, with Warren Commission and, you know, so on and so forth. So he's another one who was also at all these different events, you know, during the weekend. Now, which you mentioned Hill, and and another thing that I just wanted to stress here when you do your research is documents. Okay, nothing beats documents. Okay, but you have to be careful with the documents that you study. A lot of these documents, for example, the Mexico City documents, have all been falsified. Okay, and so. Yes, it's important to look at documents and use them, but you have to know their source and you have to study them properly in order to see how it ties into the case. And another thing you mentioned about the USSR, the Soviet Union. Well, you know, they not only the Soviet Union, but France, Germany, they all laughed at how naive the American public could be in accepting this. Okay, and the very first authors that published books about the assassination were in France and Germany. Joachim Jolsten, Leo Savage, all of these guys. And when in the US, nobody would even publish anything. You know, like I said before, Harold Weisberg had to self-publish. Well, these guys were in Europe and they could publish whatever they wanted, you know, and not have the repercussions, you know, of the government, you know, falling on, you know, and the apparatus of the government falling upon them. So, you know, that's right on, you know. And you know, all these governments, you know, in the whole world, the only country that believed that Lee Oswald shot Kennedy was the people of the United States. Okay, now that document that you showed about the CIA training Oswald, be careful with that because I've done research on that, and the jury is still out as far as its authenticity. Okay. That's something that you got to be very careful with. And like I said, my final advice is always try to be factual and analytical, and you will get the truth out. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor.
How we know Lee was framed, and by the way, I believe you have shown conclusively even that the Dallas Police Department was responsible for framing Lee Oswald. Now, we all know the official account, 3 shots from the 6th floor window, which has been falsified on multiple grounds. What's striking about the arrest report, I think, is that it's not tentative. It doesn't say he was arrested as a suspect. It states this man shot and killed President John F. Kennedy and police officer J.D. Tippit. He also shot and wounded Governor John Conley. Well, it's only 1:40. The assassination took place at 12:30. They've conducted no investigation, and yet you have this definitive assertion that this man shot and killed President John F. Kennedy. I mean, the document itself is, as it were, self-discrediting because it shows it can't possibly be the case. We now know, of course, that the famous photograph taken by James Ike Alchins, AP photographer, not only shows a bullet hole in the windshield where JFK's left ear would be if his left ear were visible, a small white spiral nebula with a dark hole in the center, but in the background just above in this region here, a figure extending out who, as many have widely believed to have been Lee Oswald, a figure standing beside him with his hands raised, has had his face blacked out, but notice how the shoulder of the figure leaning out is missing, as though he had a towel over it. And when we look more closely, we find there's a figure known as a black tie man, both in front of and behind him at the same time, which is an optical impossibility. Notice a figure with his hands raised has had his face blacked out, that his shirt has been obfuscated by a massive addition of white material, but that he's wearing a short sleeve shirt, which makes it, to me, incredible that anyone would believe that the photograph has never been altered, because these features make it what I would suggest is conclusive proof of alteration. We know that Lee told Fritz during his interview that he was out with Bill Shelley in front, which means that we have to investigate his alibi, since obviously that's the most important of all the information he gave to Fritz. When he was arrested, he bore a striking resemblance to the figure in the doorway in terms of the height, the weight, the build, the shirt, and the T-shirt, where the shirt was a very richly textured long sleeve shirt that had been considerably worn. Look at the lower part that was splayed open to the middle. It was so clear that Oswald resembled the man in the doorway that the Dallas Police Department had him remove his outer shirt before they took his mug shot. Notice a striking contrast, which I believe represents consciousness of guilt. They were working to frame him. They didn't want him to be exonerated. Richard Hook has done brilliant work comparing the features of the shirt of the man in the doorway with features on the shirt of Lee Oswald when he was arrested. This is one of his most preliminary studies. He has found dozens and dozens of similarities that really leave no doubt about it. Here we have a comparison of the Lee Oswald with a man in Mexico City who was photographed, eventually leading J. Edgar Hoover to issue a memorandum to his FBI agents in charge stating that someone was in Mexico City impersonating Lee Oswald. Larry Rivera has found documents in relation to Mexico City that it appears were never intended to be released, where you can see principles in the position to frame Lee talking about how they were going to do it, which reinforces our conclusion that Lee was in fact never in Mexico City. Here we have from a lone nutter website, John McAdams. He attempts to cast attention on the man, a face that's obfuscated in the orange shadow, away from the doorway man, but clearly the emphasis is on the checkered shirt, because there was a figure, the second from the right, standing there, to whom I refer as Gorilla Man because of his profile, clearly much heavier, much larger than Lee, much larger than the man in the doorway, who had a red and black checkered shirt that was buttoned up to the neck, which they the fallback position about the identity of doorman, therefore, was this man in the checkered shirt, which it's then claimed was Billy Lovelady, where you had Robert Groden taking a series of photographs on the right of Billy Lovelady purportedly wearing the same shirt. But if you look at the left, you can see it's obviously not, because the shirt on Gorilla Man had a pocket. The shirt on Billy Lovelady, the red and black checkered shirt, has no pocket. Here we have Billy going to the FBI on the 29th of February, 1964, wearing the shirt that he wore at the time. It was a red and white vertically striped shirt. It was a short sleeve shirt. It looked nothing like the shirt on Doorman. The FBI nevertheless sent a memorandum back to J. Edgar Hoover, identifying him as the man in the doorway. Notice the underlined sentence at the first end of the first full paragraph. He stated he was wearing a red and white vertically striped shirt and blue jeans during the time he was present in the doorway observing the shooting. Now, Larry has done absolutely sensational work with overlays, where you can take photographs that might seemingly appear to be of two different persons to determine if they're the same, just as the two top photographs look as though they might be different persons, but they turn out, of course, to be one and the same Marilyn Monroe. He did this, found suitable photographs to use to impose over the figures in the doorway, and found that, as you can see here, the man in the doorway not only has the height, the weight, the build, the shirt, the T-shirt that Lee Oswald was wearing, but he has the same facial features. When you compare Lee on the left with Billy on the right, you see, while it fits Lee hand in glove, it does not fit Billy. The chin is wrong, the ears are wrong, the nose is wrong. Clearly, the man in the doorway extending out is Lee Oswald rather than Billy Lovelady. Larry has also been able to establish, however, that the man holding his hands, which fits Billy's own description of himself as being 2 to 3 inches shorter, 15 to 20 pounds lighter, and of course, the testimony he gave to the FBI on the 29th of February, 1964, that he was wearing a red and white vertically striped T-shirt, even the facial features fit Billy. So that it looks from Richard Hook's reconstruction that they took elements internal to the original photograph to preserve the texture and other features in order to create the composite that we see in the Altons we have been subjecting to study. But that if you put it together properly, what you would have when you fill in the shirt, when you remove the black tie man from over the shoulder of doorman, it would have looked as we see on the right. In fact, here is another reconstruction Larry has done using Blender, in which you see a reconstruction of the image in the doorway. And you can tell, therefore, why they had to obfuscate the photograph and black it out. Here's yet another. I cannot say enough in complimenting Larry for his brilliant work in confirming the conclusion we'd already established based upon the height, the weight, the build, the shirt, and the T-shirt, to wit, that the man in the doorway, known as Doorman, was Lee Harvey Oswald, which not only means he cannot have been the lone demented gunman, but that he cannot have been one of the shooters. In terms of framing Lee, the life in the backyard photographs, here we have the famous photograph that appeared on the cover of Life magazine that was intended to implicate him as having the motive and the means. The public already knew he had the opportunity by being at the book depository as an employee. So here you have him holding the Mannlicher Carcano, a pistol belt with a revolver with which he is alleged to have shot Officer J.D. Tippit, holding 2 communist newspapers, The Worker and The Militant, thereby combining means and motive. He was a communist. They, of course, suppress information such as you have reported during your very fine presentations that Lee, in fact, admired JFK. He bore him no malice. I return again to this shocking arrest record, which states in a definitive fashion, having no investigation whatsoever taken place, that he was guilty not only of the assassination of JFK and the wounding of Governor Connolly, but of Tippit. Here we have one of the photographs of Lee describing the arrest as having been about 80 minutes, which would have made it actually at 150 instead of 140. Which
I'm sorry, that's Paul Bentley. That's with the cigar in his mouth, and you know that as a result of that fracas, he twisted an ankle, and then he had to put the ankle in a cast. You know, that same day. Go ahead,
Larry. I previously observed that if it was 80 minutes after, then it was 150, and the arrest record at 140 was therefore written even in advance of the arrest. Can you clarify which time is correct, 140 or 150 for the arrest at the Texas Theater? Well, here it's taking place where they're moving him out, but as you have so ably reported, there was another figure coming out in the alley in the background. This shows how far out of his way Lee would have had to go to have shot Tippit. It's really preposterous. Aquila Clemens seems to have been the key witness, reporting two men shot Tippit. Neither of them looked like Oswald. If he had come from his rooming house, he would have gone straight up Crawford onto Jefferson, taken a right to the Texas Theater. But as we will now see, there's reason to believe that, in fact, he actually arrived at the theater via the Rambler. Here we have a reconstruction of the shooting from the Search for Lee Harvey Oswald by Robert Groden. that Tippit approaches a pedestrian. He spoke to the pedestrian through the window. The assassin threw his gun and fired 3 times, hitting him in the torso, and then walked up and shot him an additional time in the right temple. There's Aquila Clemens testifying about having seen 2 men, neither of whom looked like Lee Oswald. Here we have the fascinating report from Robert Groden that appears to be accurate, that the shell casings found at the scene initially had been ejected from automatics. They're technically, of course, semi-automatics. Automatics, you press a trigger and it continues firing automatically. With a semi-automatic, it simply automatically reloads each time you pull the trigger. But the automatic shell casing, if you compare the two on the left, is the shorter round. Oswald had a revolver. His shell casing would have been longer. So there were 4 automatic shell casings, 2 Western and 2 Remington Rama, 2 different makes, which is further indication of 2 shooters. Here we have a report about a link between the Tippit murder and the Texas Theater by a fellow named Tom Lyons, where he reports in Crossfile where Jim Mars discussed a tape interview with Butch Burroughs, where someone had come into the theater shortly after 1. Look at the second paragraph, and that Burroughs actually had sold him popcorn. We find more about that when we do research. How Burroughs had told Nigel that Turner, the producer of The Men Who Killed Kennedy, that Oswald entered the theater between 1 and 1:07, and it would have therefore have been impossible for him to have been in 2 places at the same time. When Tippit was killed around 1:10, here is fascinating about Stefan Westberg and Pete Engwald looking at the Tippit case from a different angle. Here they're suggesting, Tippit was involved, that he went, to the area, but was also being set up financially, and that someone got out of the theory here they're presenting, which I believe is correct. Oswald got out of the Nash Ranger at the Texas Theater, a theater owned by Howard Hughes. Even Robert Mayhew had been a major CIA operator, was Hughes' chief of security. He bought a ticket, bought popcorn. It would appear, therefore, that the individual who went to the rooming house, took the jacket, was not, in fact, Lee, but someone who looked very much like Lee. We know the backyard photograph was fake now. We have the chin, the wrong chin. We have the insert line between the lower lip and the chin. Jack White realized that the newspapers provide an internal yardstick and you could determine the height of the individual thereby. Showed the stand-in was either only 5'6" or the image of the newspapers had been introduced too large, which turns out to be the case. We know about Lee. We know no 2 handheld snapshots should match, and yet these match with regard to the face, exactly indicating that what he told Fritz, to wit, that it was his face pasted on someone else's body, and that with time he'd be able to prove it. Here is an observation from Robert Blakey, who headed the House Select Committee investigation. If the backyard photographs are invalid, how they were produced poses far-reaching questions in the area of conspiracy. For the events, a degree of technical sophistication that would almost necessarily raise the possibility that someone conspired not only to kill the president, but to make Oswald a patsy. And of course, we've been able to show that they were indeed fabrications. In fact, Larry has observed that while Jim Mars and I had concluded that Roscoe White had been the stand-in because he had the block chin, the same approximate height, weight, and build, though we'll find Roscoe's actually a huskier guy than Lee. He had this odd lump on his wrist from a bone that healed right. Larry has observed that Roscoe actually knew a lot about photography. I would say his surmise that Roscoe probably produced the photographs themselves is correct. This was a ghost image found in the desk of a Dallas detective, and of course we know now Larry has found an image of Roscoe that enables us to superimpose and see that he is the stand-in. This is confirmation of his serving as the stand-in for Lee. where Larry's more recent work, by the way, shows that if you juxtapose Lee Oswald's own image against the image of the figure in the backdoor photographs, Lee is slighter than the back figure in those photographs, which of course is consistent with Roscoe, who is more robust, having created them. Here's yet another. Larry again has done completely brilliant work here to confirm conclusions, to solidify and strengthen the conclusions at which we had previously arrived. You can find more about all of this in my fourth, most recent book, JFK, Who, How, and Why, which has 15 contributors. And of course, in Larry's forthcoming book, The Four JFK Horsemen, which I'm very proud will be produced by moonrockbooks.com. Great pleasure to be here, to participate with you. And I think your students, Mike, are doing a sensational job. What they are exhibiting is the methodological attitude advanced by the great British philosopher Karl Popper, who says if you want to tell whether or not a theory is true, you have to test it by attempting to falsify it. If you find through repeated attempts to falsify a theory that you're unable to succeed, you have reason to believe the theory is true. In the case of the Warren Commission's theory of Lee Oswald as a lone assassin, repeated attempts to falsify have falsified the theory again and again and again. So that I conclude that conspiracy theorists who are demonized in the press are actually more intelligent, more open-minded, and more intellectually able to process information, because instead of being passive recipients who simply accept what the government tells them, they're taking the active measure of testing it in accordance with the falsificationist methodology of Karl Popper to determine whether or not the theories we're being told by the government are or are not true. And again and again and again, whether we're talking about JFK or 9/11 or Sandy Hook or the Boston bombing or even Charlottesville or Las Vegas, we find what we have been told is not true, where the greatest murder mystery in history has been resolved by attempted efforts at falsification and the consequences that follow in terms of who would have been in the position to falsify the evidence, including altering the x-rays to patch a blowout at the back of the head, substituting another brain for that of JFK, and massively revising the Zapruder film, because none of those things could have been done by some of the popular candidates for the assassination. The KGB, for example, even if it had the ability to alter films comparable to the CIA, could not have got its hands on the Zapruder. The Mafia could not have extended its reach into Bethesda Naval Hospital to alter x-rays under control of naval officers, or the agents of the Secret Service or the president's personal physician. Pro or anti-Castro Cubans could not have substituted someone else's brain for that of JFK. We're talking about a very narrow class of participants, including the Secret Service, the military and the military hospital, the FBI covering it up, Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover. So I want to compliment you, Mike, and your students for doing absolutely sensational work. I predict they're going to have very successful futures because they show active intelligence, a willingness to be open-minded and to pursue the truth wherever it may lead.
Thank you very much. This has been very fascinating, and I think that you've seen since we talked to you last that the kids have done a lot more research, and this could actually prove the idea that you can be a researcher at any age, and this needs to continue.
I think that's absolutely right, Mike, and I think that Madison and Lance were really impressive. I mean, what they showed was sensational. I mean, that quantity of information for time spent in presenting was just phenomenal. And I just want to compliment you and your students for the way in which you've been pursuing this with intelligence and aggression and discretion in sorting things out to emphasize a bottom line from Larry. A key feature in attempting to evaluate theories is to authenticate the evidence. we find the government is fabricating evidence again and again and again. It did that with regard to JFK, as we've seen here. It's been done with regard to 9/11. It's been done with regard to Sandy Hook, the Boston bombing, Charlottesville, Las Vegas. So I say, you know, keep at it, keep going, keep an open mind, keep being aggressive and not taking anything for granted. I acknowledge that most Americans have to spend their time earning enough money to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. They take what they hear from the media as though it were true. If they hear the same report from ABC, from CNN, from MSNBC, they assume they're hearing the same thing because there have been independent investigations. What we have to appreciate is that the CIA realized they had to infiltrate and control the media if they were going to be able to succeed in manipulating the opinions of the American people through Operation Mockingbird, where as early as 1975, William Colby, then its director, testified to Congress that the agency owned everyone of significance in the media. In that day and age, there was no alternative media, which is why they're so frustrated today. Too much truth is getting out by independent researchers who are not taking for granted what they're told, who are willing to test and evaluate the theories they're given, and who are discovering in case after case that the evidence has been fabricated. To give a striking illustration, in relation to Sandy Hook, we've now been able to demonstrate how they created the kids out of photographs of older children when they were younger. We have proven it for Noah Posner, who's the most celebrated of the Sandy Hook kids, because he's so unusual. He not only died on 14 December 2012 in Newtown, but again on 16 December 2014 in Pakistan, where his father, presumptive Lenny Posner, sent Kelly Watt a death certificate for Noah. When she challenged him, it turned out to be a fabrication, the bottom half of a real, the top half of a fake. It had no file number. It had the wrong estimated time of death. But Kelly also noticed there was a striking resemblance between photographs of Noah and of his older stepbrother, Michael Vavner. We made it a collaborative project and have proven that Noah Posner was made out of photographs of Michael Vavner. And it's astonishing to report that the deep state has been taking down the images that prove the case. They deleted one of my blogs a couple of weeks ago. 2 days ago, they deleted another of my blogs. I have backup copies, so I'm able to put them back up. But it's further confirmation that we have discovered how they did it, and the deep state does not want the American people to know.
And it's just a continuation of exactly what happened to JFK and before that, because that's the way history is, Jim. You know, there's just, history is written by the victors, okay? So, you know.
Or as Voltaire put it, history is a pack of lies the living play upon the dead.
Yeah. I just want to, again, in closing, my last advice would be to remind you that technology has caught up with the photographic evidence that has been left, behind. Okay, and the already technology has demonstrated that all this evidence has been falsified, has been altered. The Zapruder film, Douglas Horn, yourself, Dr. Fetzer, and the people that you put together in your great book, The Great Zapruder Film Hoax, is a must-read. Okay, for you young people, that are starting to get into the case, the movie JFK, you have to start there. And I don't know if it's still available, like used to be able to rent videos, DVDs and stuff like that, but I'm sure you can get a copy, from eBay or from one of the distributors, cheap, because it's worth having, in your library, because it's something that, it prepares you for the case moving forward. Now, some people might say, and I've mentioned it before, happened 54 years ago, why are you still, hung up on this? Well, historians of the future, are going to look at our work, and they're the ones that are going to decide, exactly what happened here. Obviously we're still living, the aftermath of the cover-up, okay? But the more work that we put into, the more documents that we study, the more research that we do, and connecting the dots and everything are going to determine in the future, you know, how historians, you know, write this up, you know, so that when the history books that you have right now will reflect what really happened.
Again, thank you so much, and I know you have some commitments to go to, and we appreciate the time. I'll be emailing you because I have a couple of schools that kind of watched some today, and they're interested in trying to do this again like we did with Canada, but they're interested in trying to do one next month on if we land on the moon or not.
I'll send you some resources you can kick around, Mike, if I haven't already done so.
Yeah, yeah, if you could on that, that would be really good. It's a real special group of people. I've been working with them for probably 10 to 15 years now. The people in Turkey are she's from Basra. Her kids are very marvelous, and they're very anxious to get an opportunity to do something like this. And like you say, I think that the process of learning is more important than tear up the books and try to do something like this. Be a lot more important for the kids to learn.
Well, Mike, I want to compliment you on your brilliance in pursuing this with your students this way and encouraging them to do original research. I think that Madison and Lance demonstrated today conclusively that high school students are capable of doing high quality research. This was very impressive, and I simply congratulate you and the program of which you are a part for advancing the study of serious subjects at this level of education. It is to be applauded by the whole world.
Well, I appreciate that very much. We might use that clip to show it to other people, because a lot of people are very afraid of trying to do something different. This isn't really, like Larry said, this isn't different. This has been going on for 54 years, whether it be Mary Woodward. I forget her last name. She passed away this summer. But when she wrote that story, and they were changing the story as we speak,
yeah,
she explains quite a bit of stuff that, you know, and then Bill Newman backs it up with saying that President Kennedy stood up in the car, and that's all missing from the Zapruder film. Secret Service gets out, the car stops, that's all missing from the Zapruder film. Most of the stuff is already there. We just need to go flush it out.
Well, there's no benefit, Mike, from going through life being played for a sap by your government. If you're being told something by your government and it doesn't look right, test it, check it out, see if it's capable of resisting attempts at falsification. Because as we've seen here today, in the case of JFK, once you undertake a serious effort to falsify the official narrative, it falls apart in many different directions. This is an excellent exhibition of what can be accomplished by high school students today. And I compliment Madison, Lance, and you, Mike, and your whole program for undertaking this project.
Okay, thank you so much, and we'll end it there. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.
You got it.
Bye.
Lance and
Bye.
Madison, great job, Lance and Madison. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.